It's Dr. Richard Downs, and I have on the line with me Dr. Russell Kort. He's going to be presenting on EMF mitigation and also ionizing mitigation strategies. Dr. Kort has been in practice in medicine for 37 years, right, Russ?
Yep.
7 years. He's last 10 years has been in functional neurology, and he's the lead physician for Dr. EMS Research and Treatment Center. He's also the chairman of the Defender Shields Science and Medical Advisory Board. He's co-author of the book, Wake Up the Happy Brain. And he's the innovator of the year for brain tap technologies. Is that right? Among other things, I know I haven't covered it all, but I wanted to make sure I got most of it in there. Is that good, Russ?
That's true. Yes.
So we're going to talk about, I take radiation, dentists take films a lot, okay, because we have to see between the teeth. And and then Russ was talking to me about how that can be mitigated, and he's got scientific validated peer-reviewed studies to show that we can mitigate that even better than just using shields and collars and aprons, because some of that scatter radiation still goes to the thyroid, brainstem, and reproductive organs, as well as other radiosensitive tissues in the body. And really, all tissues of the body are somewhat radiosensitive anyway, right, Russ? Yeah. So I'm going to.
All tissues are sensitive.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share a little, just a short PowerPoint here. Let me get the share button going here, and then I'll let you kind of present here and on this, Russ. Let me go ahead and bring up the. Get the right one here. Go ahead. I'm going to go back to the beginning of this thing, and we're going to present. Okay. So, there we go. Janet's coming in. So this is, I'm with Sleep Balance Academy. Sleep Balance Academy is the sponsor of this program. And Sleep Balance Academy encompasses the Dental Chiropractic Collaborative, which Sleep Balance Academy has been promoting now for quite a while. Quite a number of people are becoming interested in and beginning to coach with me in sleep medicine from both dentist and chiropractic fields. So the name of this program is called Ionizing EMF Radiation Tissue Damage Mitigation Pre-Radiography Protocol. And this is Dr. Russell Kort. I've already given you his credentials, just some more information about Dr. Kort. He'll be our main presenter today. And Russ, I'm going to go ahead and click through the slides, and you can comment. When you want the next slide, you just let me know, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
All right. So let's go ahead and start. Well, Russ, you're on.
Let's not put this one up just yet, because I want to bring that in, so we can just leave up that last slide.
Okay.
So my name is Dr. Rus Kort. As Dr. Downs said, I've been in medicine for 37 years. My first decade was on a paramedic and fire unit. And then I went to Palmer College Chiropractic, and I've been a chiropractor for 22 years and studied functional neurology. And everything that I've done in my career seemed to make a lot of sense. And whenever I went into a fire or went into a scene, I always looked at the big picture. I also had the opportunity to bring cell phones into Australia in 1987. And about 6 years ago, I read a book called Radiation Nation, and I could see it, but I can't reach it. But I read this manuscript called Radiation Nation, and in that manuscript, Dr. Downs, I discovered that I'd actually been suffering from EMF radiation for probably the last 20 years. And like many of us in dentistry and in chiropractic, a lot of us take films. I mean, dentists.
Okay.
Sorry, dentists take films, and chiropractors take films. I know I was an upper cervical doctor in my clinic, and I took a lot of films, much like Dennis, of the atlas. We took one through the top of the head, and we took a nasium view. And every time I took x-rays, I just felt terrible. You know, I knew that I was giving these people ionizing radiation, and it was for the betterment of their spine and their health, but I still didn't feel good about it. That's kind of the nutshell of what we're going to talk about. A little bit about ionizing radiation, and then more about non-ionizing radiation.
Okay.
So with chiropractic and with dentistry.
Oh my gosh.
Hold on.
There's no way this is gonna fit me.
Hold on just a minute. We're gonna take some of that out. I gotta mute some people here. Just go ahead and mute people. Hold on, I'll just do that right now. Okay, so there we go. So everybody seems to be muted now. Janet, mute Janet. There we go.
Okay, so today, and what I want to do with this call, Dr. Downs, is I'd like to, find out what people. For me, when I knew what was going on, I had to come up with a solution.
Right.
And so, for many of us, when we're doctors and we understand that ionizing radiation breaks down the tissues all the time. It has since the beginning of radiation, and we're going to talk about a doctor that wrote many of the books on radiation, but so does non-ionizing radiation. It just takes longer. So in our clinics, and I'll speak of my clinic, but we can just tie this directly into dentistry. In my clinic, I would take a lateral film of the neck, and I would take an open mouth film, and I'd take a nasium film and a vertex film. And so I'm x-raying the entire head. And then I would also sometimes take, I would take a few cervical films as far as the lateral flexion extension, now and then thoracic and more pelvic films. But x-ray was a part of my life for 22 years. And like I said, I just never felt good about it, especially the neck films, because even though we use lead shields and so forth, and I had filters on my tube, when we make that exposure, we know that we're ionizing these people. We know that we're breaking down DNA tissues and having an effect on their brain. The same is true with dentistry. And we know that we're affecting the thyroid, but not many people really think about other systems that we're affecting, like the brainstem. And we have 12 cranial nerves that run the show. And so when in dentistry, when you're doing a frontal view, you're shooting directly into the brainstem. Oftentimes when you're doing lateral views or bite wing views, even though you're trying to hone in on the film, you're still exposing the brainstem. And, cranial nerve 2, 3, 4, and 6, they all have to do with the eyes. And it runs the show, runs the entire show. So those are big problems. And up until recently, we didn't really have a way to protect people from the inside out. We have ways to protect people from the outside in, but not the inside out. And so about 7 years ago, I was introduced to Dr. Kedar Prasad. And Dr. Prasad has a formula that it was called military micronutrient formula. And this formula was actually created, he created it in his laboratories, but he was then brought after 9/11. He actually had a meeting in the towers the day the towers came down. And he was in the San Francisco airport watching the towers come down. And he's a little Indian, and he was like, "Oh, golly, I don't think we're going to have our meeting today. The office is gone."
Yeah.
And it was pretty surreal. 2 months later, he was in Washington, D.C., and the phone rang, and there was a general on the phone, and the general asked him to come to Quantico that night. And when he went to Quantico, he was told that we were going to war, and there were generals from the US, and then there was also some Russian generals. And he was handed a piece of paper, and the general said to him, "Dr. Prasad, we know about your formula. What we want to know is your formula better than the Russians?" And I've talked to Dr. Prasad many, many times, and I'm like, "Are you serious?" And he goes, "Yes, this is exactly the way it went down." So he looked at his formula, at the Russian formula, and he said, "Yeah, my formula is better than the Russians." And he said, "Well, how do you know?" And this is where we get into that statement. When we know, we have a responsibility to do something about it. So he said, "How do you know?" And he goes, "Well, my formula has vitamin E succinate in it, and theirs doesn't. And this is one of the ways that we use to transmit nutrients into the brain." And he goes, "Well, how do you know that vitamin E succinate does that?" And Dr. Prasad looks at me and goes, "Because I discovered it." And he said, "I also discovered butyric acid, and I was co-discovery on L-DOPA." So Dr. Prasad, to give you an idea of the pedigree of this man, he has personally published 29 textbooks, medical textbooks on radiation, diabetes, cancer, Huntington's, Parkinson's, and the list goes on. And so this general said, "Okay, your formula is better, you say. Do you have any research on it?" And he said, "Yeah, I have this really cool fly study." And he explains how he genetically modified fruit flies to give them lymphocytic leukemia. And when he exposed them to proton radiation, they all died, except for the ones that drank his formula. They never got the cancer. And he became very famous with that. And this general looks at him and says, "You got anything else?" And he said, "No, I don't have anything else." So the way this went down was, he said, "Dr. Prasad, you have to get approval from Congress or the Senate, and you have to do more research. We have to have more research on this product." So what happened was this man, he went to Congress, to the Senate, to the House, to the Department of Defense 17 times on his own. That's somebody who's like committed, absolutely committed to the mission. On the 17th time, he was given $12.5 million. And then he was given another $12.5 million in private funding. The reason I tell you this story is because I don't know many people on the planet that care about humanity so much that they would take and go themselves to Congress and walk the halls of Congress and the Senate in order to get approval so that he could help people. And he did this because he was around when we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and he felt like he needed to create something to help people from radiation damage. So the product, when he got the money, the 25 million, he went on to conduct, NASA, Department of Defense, the Navy, and the Marines went on to conduct 14 clinical studies, 7 human and 7 animal, and we now have 9 patents on the product. And the product was proven to protect our soldiers from radiation. And you might think, well, what kind of radiation are you going to get? Well, apparently we do depleted uranium on many of our armament. So radiation, biowarfare, and extreme stress. Well, if we think about what we have today in our own homes, we have radiation because we've been locked down for a long time, and we have our routers on. And in our research, we found that the average household of 4 has somewhere around 25 Wi-Fi devices. So we have radiation, non-ionizing. We have biowarfare because, you know, I don't know about the dentist, I'm sure with the dentist, we all have to clean our tables now. We have to clean them down with different products, and that's another talk. Dr. Downs, we know we have the best product, but a lot of doctors are using Lysol and other types of disinfectants. So we have biowarfare. And then we have extreme stress. And the extreme stress is that everywhere we turn, people are wearing masks.
Mhm.
And we are also stressed as a result of wearing masks.
Hmm.
So
So Dr. Kort, was the radiation damage in Cuba on our diplomats an EMF radiation?
oh, such a good question, Dr. Downs. So there's a paper out called the Havana paper.
Yeah.
And I actually our team sent that to Dr. Prasad to look over. And it was Havana, Cuba, it was China, and now as recently as a month to 6 weeks ago, it was Washington, DC.
Mhm.
And yes, we do believe it was an EMF type of directed
It was
device.
attacked, right? It was attacked. Yeah.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm. So when I first got involved with this company 7 years ago, we had the micro daily EMF formula. I am within arm's reach of it. Hang on a second.
It's all right. We can't see you right now, Russ.
There we go. So we have the micro daily EMF formula. This is what it looked like. It was called the military micronutrient formula, and it came in blister packs. And so what I did when I was x-raying my patients is they'd come in the door. If I knew I was going to take x-rays on them, I would put a couple of the capsules underneath their tongue and let them dissolve.
Mhm.
And then after I'd tell them, listen, this was developed for the military to protect them against radiation, biowarfare, and extreme stress. And since I'm going to be doing x-rays on you today, this is what we're going to do. And they gladly took the product. And then I had my staff make sure that they had 3 more capsules. Actually, at that time, it was 2 capsules, 2 more capsules to take that night. And then I gave them a week's worth of capsules to take. And they said, well, why are you giving me these capsules? And I said, well, because I've x-rayed you. And since I've x-rayed you and I know that this is harmful to you, even though we needed it for diagnostic purposes,
Mhm.
I have answers to help to repair your DNA. And this product has 14 clinical studies.
Mhm.
So, and 9 patents. And what ended up happening from that is that after a week, they'd come back and they'd say, can I have some more of those pills? And I'd say, you can order them and be a customer, you bet. And so it was, it was an additional profit center in my company.
Mhm.
And then a few years ago, when it was actually about 2.5 years ago, I was having lunch with Dr. Prasad, and myself and my lead researcher, Jet, were sitting down with him. And we talked to him and told him our concerns about EMF, because we've been researching electromagnetic fields for the last 6 years. So how long have electromagnetic fields been around? You have any ideas, Dr. Downs?
Well, I would think they've been around ever since we started using electricity.
Well, I'll just let you know that the first text message
Mhm.
was sent in 1844 on May 24th, and it was from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland. And the first text message was, "Oh God, what hath thou wrought?"
Hmm.
And that was by telegraph. And so we actually have scientific papers from the mid to late 1800s about this mysterious sickness called EMF, or electromagnetic sickness, that was a big problem for women. 2/3 of them were women operators who did the telegraph machine. And then in the 1920s, the psychiatrists came out and they said, there's no such thing as electromagnetic sickness. These people are all psychotic and they need to be medicated.
Mhm.
So that's the way this all went down. But that's it in a nutshell.
Okay.
What other questions do you have for me? I'm sure you want to lead me into something new.
Well, you were saying, I think some people are more susceptible to this radiation as far as sickness than others.
It's a great question. Actually, all of us are susceptible to EMF radiation, like x-rays. You know, you're not going to have somebody that's laying in the dentist chair and they're going to go, "Hey doc, this time the x-ray is not going to work on me. I know, I'm going to adapt to it," you know, and they're going to, no, it worked. They're not going to adapt to an x-ray, and they're not going to adapt to EMF.
Yeah.
And the problem is that, you know, our EMF world has changed dramatically, but the protectiveness of our EMF world has not changed at all. In fact, in 1996, so I brought cell phones into Australia in 1987. In 1996, we gave the FCC, the Federal Communications Committee, the rights to protect us. It's a terrible, terrible story. So in 1996, they tested cell phone radiation on a 200-pound Marine and said that the specific absorption rate for radiation was this. And since that time, it's been revisited once. This was revisited in 2019, and the FCC decided that we don't need to make any changes. So here it is. From 1996 to today, our cell phones are now 700 times the radiation that the standards were set in 1996. They don't turn down for our children. We put our cell phone against our head, and we put it against our head. Let's think about this in the dental world. So we put it against our head. It's going directly into our brainstem. It's going directly into our sublingual, I'm trying to think of parotid gland, goes into different types of glands in the mouth, the teeth, the jaw, and the throat. And a lot of my patients say, "Oh, doc, I don't put this phone against my head. I point it at my neck like this and talk on speakerphone."
Mhm.
Well, they're pointing it at their thyroid. And we began this conversation with protection for the thyroid. There is no protection from your cell phone for the thyroid. Then a lot of people will say, "Well, I don't do that. I just put it down here and point it at my heart." Well, here's the problem with this, Dr. Downs. The brain runs on electrical impulses, and so does the heart. And so we're seeing cancers of the brain in people that we've never seen them in. We're seeing cancers, we're seeing glioblastomas in 30-year-olds. It was considered an old man's disease. We're seeing thyroid cancer, and we're seeing Hashimoto's at a rate that we've never seen before. And now in our research, we're seeing heart cancers, which we've never had heart cancers before. But we're going to talk about how EMF radiation affects the whole body and how does it affect us in our practices. So in our practice, let's look at chiro and dental. We have an obligation to protect and serve. So now I've told you a little bit about, you already knew about ionizing radiation, but now I've told you a little bit about non-ionizing radiation. And this is a deeper discussion for another time, but we have so many illnesses that are being created by our electrical environment. When we go back to, does it affect all of us? It affects everyone. Non-ionizing radiation, everyone has a cell phone. We're estimating 96% of people have a cell phone. The other day I was lecturing down at Camp Pendleton in California, and I was in a small room with 30 people. And I asked those 30 people, I said, "Who has a cell phone?" All 30 people raised their hand. I said, "Who has two?" And 3 people raised their hand. And I said, "Who has 3?" And 1 person raised their hand. And so I had them shut them all off. I had them put them on airplane mode. That's something very simple that you can do in your clinic, and you should do that in your clinic, because we're looking at 100 million people in the United States. 1/3 of the population has symptoms like I do associated with EMF. Well, let's look at the symptoms. You said it just a few minutes ago when you asked about the Havana paper.
Mhm.
The symptoms that these people had were concussion-like symptoms, but they had never had a concussion. And the work I've done for the last 12 years has been in concussion. And we started seeing patients with these concussion-like symptoms, but they had never had a concussion. They'd never had a blast injury or anything like that. So we had to look outside the box. What was causing these concussion-like symptoms? And we found out that it's all the bees in the room. So
You need,
EMF.
okay.
Go ahead.
Are you ready for the next slide? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a heart rate variability. Dr. McCarley, do you know what a heart rate variability monitor is?
I think I have them on mute, but if, you can unmute if you want to, McCarley.
I do. We do heart rate variability as part of our initial intake and our periodic reassessments.
We do it when they walk in the door and when they walk out of the door.
Okay.
We do it every day. And so you're familiar with these slides.
I am. In fact, my chiropractor uses your technology.
Perfect. So a couple of weeks ago, I had an 80-year-old woman at my house for a barbecue. And she is a professional fiddler, like world-class fiddler. But now she's starting to have trouble in concerts because she's not able to read the music and she's not able to remember the songs that she wants to play. And so I said to her, well, let's just do an HRV, a heart rate variability. And she's like, okay. So we sat her down and we did the heart rate variability on her. And she said, what do you think this is? Why are my numbers so bad? And I said, well, where do you live? Well, I live on a busy street. How much time do you spend on your cell phone? A lot. What does that mean exactly? Well, I carry it on me all the time, and I'm on it. I'm on it a lot. I like YouTube and I like Facebook, and I'm on my phone most of the day because I don't have anything else to do. And I said, okay. Are you near a cell tower? And she goes, yeah, I am fairly close to a cell tower. So these are all things that we have to look at for EMF. And in our next coming talks, we're going to talk about, the rooms and what your house is like as well. And so I touched a little bit on that. And I said, well, tell me about your bed. Is your bed a metal bed? And she goes, yes, it's a metal spring bed. And I said, okay. Do you ever shut the router off at night? And she said, no, I never shut the router off at night. Okay. And then I said, so do you have a lamp by your bed? She goes, no, I have two. Okay. And where do you put your phone when you sleep? Well, I like to make sure that my daughter is okay. So I have my phone either in bed with me or I have it next to my head and, on the table. And then comes the big question, which we're going to talk about at another time, and that is, do you have a CPAP? And she's like, no, I don't have a CPAP. So we started going through these slides, and when we looked at them, we can see that in this first slide under total power, the number should be 2385 to 4545, and it's 303. And that red is what we determine as what I'm determining now as shock. And we're going to get a little bit into mitochondria. We all know that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell and that they drive the system. But what most people don't know is that the mitochondria have a secondary function. And that secondary function is actually environmental sensory perception. Okay, so the mitochondria actually determine, am I safe? And so in this lady's situation, she's not safe because the environment that she's in, she's holding a phone to her head or on her body, and her electrical environment in her home is not safe. And so even if you don't feel threatened, your mitochondria can pick that up. And what happens when they pick that up is the cell does two things. The first thing it does is has a drop in voltage, and we can measure that with EEG. And then the second thing it does is it hangs on to its oxygen, and we call that oxidative stress. So in this first slide, you can see on the left, there's a ton of red, but on the slide on the right, the red has been replaced by the yellow. And what we did with her was I gave her 3 of these, which is our EMF formula. So we took the original military formula about a year ago, and we added a methylated folic acid, the appropriate methylated folic acid, methylated B12, a little green tea to increase stimulation for the mitochondria, resveratrol, curcumin, and quercetin. That's all we did to the formula. Dr. Prasad did it. And so we took 3 of these capsules and put them under her tongue. And then I had her watch an 8-minute video on 5G. And then I retested her. So you can see in the timeline on May 23rd that the first initial test was done at 5:02 and the second test was done at 5:26, 24 minutes. Let's go to the next slide, Dr. Downs. So the top slide is her stress index, and it's much better to have more bars. So in the first one, the number should be between 10 and 100, and hers is at 510. And 24 minutes later, it's at 111. That's a fantastic result. And below is the cardiac index, and you can see the scattergram has changed. Her heart changed in 24 minutes with a micronutrient. Dr. Downs, next slide, please.
Yeah.
So in this slide, the slide on the left is the neurohormonal regulation. Again, this is on a 50 to 100%. She scored 19%. This had her really alarmed. I mean, as we're going through this, she's like, what should I do? I feel like I should drink more. And in the 24 minutes, it went to 83%. And the same with the red and blue down there. That I like to equate to ATP and the ability to produce energy. Look at the difference between the left side and the right side. Next slide, Dr. Downs. So this is the slide that really made her cry, because nobody wants to see their brain in black and red. And so she was a 20, but the most important thing is the slide below it, where we look at the delta brain pattern. Because what I've seen in the last 6 years of research in many of our children, and I'm talking 95% of the children that I test, they have a delta pattern, and that's a sleep pattern. Her brain is in shock.
Let me say a little bit about that. I have at least 2 papers showing that EMF radiation from cell phone is reducing REM sleep cycles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So this is a daytime pattern. You know, this is at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and her brain is asleep. So in 24 minutes, her brain goes from a 20 to a 78. And she diminishes that delta pattern from 63% to 29%. And she improves the beta wave from 5% to 57%. I've never seen results like these with anything, but I see these kinds of results all the time. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and also you're talking about this formula leaving out some chemicals and vitamins that you're going to get to in a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This was the clincher. When you can show this to a patient, you have a patient for life. So when we started, her age is 80, but her biological age was 82. And in 24 minutes, we changed it to 47. She couldn't believe it. She was so excited. Next slide, please. This is the kicker. When you show this to a patient and you say, look, your overall health is 15%, they start to cry. But in 24 minutes, we were able to change it to 77%. So what makes this formula so special? I mean, seriously, we made this for the military, and we did it to protect them against radiation, biowarfare, and extreme stress. What makes this formula so special? Well, it's not only what's in it with the methylated formula of the folic acid and the B12 and the green tea. Those are all really important things that we're seeing tremendous results with. but it's what's not in it. And so what's not in it, and Dr. Brian, just say yes or no. Did you bring your supplements with you? No, okay. So I was having a conversation with Dr. Prasad and I asked him this question. I said, you know, I have all this stuff in my cabinets. I have tons and tons of micronutrients in my cabinets. What makes this so special? Why does this work? And he just said, well, Dr. Kort, it's not only that this is 40 years of his life's work. Not only did I take and look at every cell and how the cells respond to the nutrients, you know, but I also didn't put certain things in it. I'm like, well, what didn't you put in it? And he goes, if your product has vitamin C, I'm like, everything has vitamin C. And then he says, copper, iron, and manganese. If your product has vitamin C, copper, iron, and manganese, you should throw it out. So while I'm on the phone with him, I go to my cabinets and I start throwing stuff out because everything I had copper, iron, and manganese. So when we look at that, why would that make such a difference? I like to keep things really simple. And in our treatment, we have 3 keys that we teach doctors to unlock the healing cycle. And that's going to be for another talk. And then we also use the ABCs. Alignment, dentists have to have chiropractors, and chiropractors need dentists. Because if they're not aligned correctly and you do a bunch of work on their jaw, you know, we're going to create problems that these people are never going to be able to get out of. And so this is a relationship that's made in heaven. So what happens with the iron, copper, and manganese combined with vitamin C is this. If you have a cast iron skillet, which so many of us do, and you put orange juice in it, it rusts. If you put tomatoes in it, it rusts. You'll have to constantly oil the pan so that it doesn't rust. It's called oxidative stress. And what we find is that I'm willing to go out on the branch on this. Probably 98 to 99% of supplements on the market that are in the grocery store have vitamin C, copper, iron, and manganese in them. And so they actually make us sicker than they do healthy. We think we're taking something that's helping us, but most people who take a supplement don't feel much of a difference. Or maybe they feel a difference from caffeine. There's no caffeine in this product. But where the tire really meets the road is when you have something like a heart rate variability and you can just do a simple test. So what I'm suggesting for the doctors that have heart rate variability is that when the patient comes in the door, put a couple capsules underneath their tongue. And when they leave, retest them. You know, test them when they walk in, test them when they leave. But that's for the chiropractors. So Dr. Downs, I think you had a slide that you wanted to share with us. Somebody had a premium product that they were looking at. Oh, no, last slide.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a meridian slide. And when I started this, I said that people point their phone at their heart, and the heart runs on electrical signals. Look at what happened if we look at this down here in the lower left. The heart was at 10%, and now it's at 51%. And the small intestine, because brain and gut are directly linked, went from 15% to 57%. I've never seen these kinds of reactions with people, and yet this happens all the time. And we know it because I actually utilize the microdaily as an emergency first aid, because I get these concussion-like symptoms when I'm exposed to too much Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi and electrical devices, and in places where it's really concentrated. So for instance, maybe you know people who can't watch a movie that's being streamed. They sit down to watch a movie and in a few minutes they're asleep. It's because they've gone hypoxic. We're starting to see this in a much bigger problem. And maybe you see it in your chairs, maybe you see it in your dental chairs, and maybe you see it in some of your chiropractic offices. I used to have a computer that sat right next to me, and I'd be sitting there doing an interview with somebody and dozing off because the electricity was right there at my head. And we see this in dentist chairs. Dental chairs have a ton of electricity going through them as the main hub. And we find a lot of patients that fall asleep as a result of the electricity going into their bodies. Next slide, Dr. Downs. This is one of the supplements, and I don't know what the name of the supplement was, but right there in the upper right-hand side, you can see that the
It's
product
called a
has,
women's formula, and one of the gals that couldn't be on the seminar, but once the recording sent this to me, and so I got a close up of it on the next slide here, but
okay,
you can see here, there's the vitamin C in this area,
yep.
and then the copper and manganese. I don't know that I got
It's,
whatever.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And there's probably iron in this somewhere as well. I would imagine that there's,
I believe there is.
I think there's
But I
gotta be
can't.
iron in it somewhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so iron, copper, and manganese.
Well, a lot of women's supplements have extra iron in them.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And what we're finding with people that have EMF hypersensitivity, like I said, all of us are EMF sensitive. There's no one that the EMF is not going to affect their cellular network. It's just that some of us are blessed with superhero powers to be able to feel the electric environment first. And we're the ones that need to shout from the rooftops. And that's the 100 million people that doctors are saying, you're crazy. You need to be medicated. You clearly have a deficiency in antidepressant medication. And you clearly have a deficiency in melatonin, and you clearly have a deficiency in other things because nobody feels their electric environment.
I got a question, Dr. Court.
Yes.
I haven't read all the articles that Dr. Prasad has put together, of course, but is the EMF actually causing the metal ions in the cells to oscillate? Is that one of the ways it damages, or is that just?
It's a really great question, and I have a team of people who are working on that right now.
Okay. I didn't get a clear answer on that, but it was something that I was intrigued by.
Yeah, so Dr. Prasad has written 29 textbooks, and he has personally published somewhere around, we don't have the exact number, 289 peer-reviewed papers. In fact, he just published, the last paper that he published that I have is on COVID, and now we're reading, he actually sent my team a paper that is published, but it's not let out yet, on eyes and the negative effects of
Well,
EMF on the eye.
my colleague in Topham Health is interested in the hearing loss uses that they did a lot of work, a lot of studies on the hearing loss, and he's primarily concerned that he thinks that'll be a big market for, and he wants to know more about the hearing.
One of the studies that we did was on tinnitus, and we found that soldiers that were the concussion study that was done at Walter Reed is my favorite study because I love concussion. I had my first concussion at 7, and I've had 5 since then, or 6. I can't remember. But the concussion study was really interesting because we got these soldiers 2 months after they'd been blown up and had blast injuries. And so it was a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study at Walter Reed. And about 2.5 to 3 months into the study, the nurses came back to Dr. Prasad and said, we have to stop the study. And he's like, oh, why do we have to stop the study? You know, and because the soldiers that didn't get it know who they are, and they're really pissed. And so the blind was broken in the research study, which is hilarious. But it works incredibly well with concussion. We are just having tremendous results with it.
Okay, good.
And I'm seeing a lot regarding the eyes. We also have an eye formula that we can talk about later.
Right.
But as we kind of wind down, I want to talk about how can we put this into your office? I mean, this is when we know that something works and that it is highly validated and that is backed by research and it's backed by patents. I feel like we have a responsibility to share that with everybody we know. And when it comes to cell phone toxicity, when it comes to Wi-Fi, when it comes to EMF, just EMF toxicity, in the last 10 years, you may not know this number, but I'm going to give this number to you. Dr. Downs, in the last 10 years, how much do you think the radiation environment has increased?
I have no idea.
1 quintillion. I didn't even know what a quintillion was. 1 quintillion is a 1 with 18 zeros behind it. Our phones are 700 times the radiation, and our children that are under the age of 25 have never been out of Wi-Fi.
Mm.
This is the biggest catastrophic health crisis that our planet has ever seen.
Mm.
And I got news for you, and I'm just going to share a little bit of this. So when we look at some of the disorders that are going around that have been plaguing us in the last, well, let's back it up. One of the things that we know about EMF radiation is that it causes a thickening in the blood called rouleau. And I tell my patients it's called sticky blood. Okay, I want you to think about this and come to your own conclusions. There's a nasty little bug out there, and it creates very thick mucus and sticky blood. And then we're seeing some other things as well. So sticky blood is a really big problem. And one of the things that we know is that sticky blood, or rouleau, is enhanced dramatically by EMF. So in our 2-year case study, we are now doing, my research team is putting together a series of tests. So we have a hair analysis profile, and it's very specific. It's not like anything you've ever seen. It's the first time it's ever been done. We've found a company in Canada that has allowed us to customize the lab, and we've done that. So we have a hair analysis. We have a fecal analysis that allows us to create a probiotic according to their own fecal material. And then we have an omega assay, like an omega group test that we do with a couple of drops of blood. With this, we've been able to recently, and I'm talking a week or 2 weeks, we have been able to determine some patterns that we're starting to see in EMF toxicity. And the next time we speak, Dr. Downs, I'll do information on our case study that we're a 2-year case study with an electrician from a local computer company called Intel.
Okay.
And he spent 14 months bedridden when he came to see me. He was in a wheelchair, and in 2 days we had him walking, and in 1 month we had him at Disneyland. But we changed his brain dramatically. And he's been, under care periodically. With COVID, we didn't have him under care as much, but he still had this emotional component. I'm going to tie that back to the mitochondria. I want you to think about this. He had this emotional component that when he went out and tried to drive in the car, he'd feel like he wasn't safe. He'd feel panicked, and he'd feel lightheaded. And what we found was that there was actually a hypoxia coming from the thickening of his blood. And we didn't find that until we ran these labs, these specific labs on him. And so one of the labs that we got back said that he was a very, very, very high risk for a massive heart attack at 43 years old because his blood was sludge. So there's a lot that has to go on here. This discussion is going to take more time.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you about what I think that we should do in our clinics. And that is, it's really simple. Those people, you can get a free sample. Anybody on this call can get a free sample of this micronutrient product by just texting free sample to 563-239-3261. And this free sample will be sent to you. And this is what it looks like. So you're going to get this cool little trifold brochure.
Let me hit, let me stop the share here and we'll get you back. There you go. Go ahead and show it then.
Okay. So you get this cool little trifold brochure, okay, on the microdaily EMF formula. And then when you open it up, that's Dr. Kedar Prasad. Now I'm going to show you a quick picture of him. How old do you think he is?
I don't know.
He's the world's first PhD radiological biologist.
Okay.
And he's 86 years old.
Hmm.
And he just published another paper and he doesn't slow down. I talk to him every week. In fact, we're going to be doing another research study with him. Unbelievable human being, unbelievable. When you open it up, it's got a little bit of information about 5G. It's got a 2-day supply of the nutrients, and then it has everything that's in it and everything that's not.
Great. Let's open this up to a little questionnaires. Any questions from the participants right now? If you'd like to say give a question, just unmute yourself and go ahead.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Sure.
Dr. Kort, you mentioned the methylation in the supplement.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that with a patient who is MTHFR positive?
That's the formula. It's an MTHFR appropriate folic acid and an MTHFR appropriate B12.
Okay.
And
that helps
we have it
cross the blood-brain barrier, right?
I have a team that can answer those questions. If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to say it because somebody's going to record it and pin me to the table. So, next month it actually got delayed because we're getting a patent on it. We're going to have a children's gummy.
That's right. I forgot about
available.
That. Yeah.
And it was supposed to come out on the 21st, but it's been delayed because it's going through the patenting process and it's going to be released next month. What's cool about this gummy is Dr. Prasad, he is just the most meticulous human being I've ever known. And so this is not half the adult formula. This is a specifically designed children's formula that the micronutrient formula, the EMF formula is the basis of it. But there are certain ingredients that children don't need as much of because they're smaller. And there are certain ingredients that they need more of because their brains are developing and their brains are under constant stress from EMF. And, when we put a phone to a child's brain, that radiation goes all the way through. 6 years ago, we used to say that it goes like part of the way through. That's not the case anymore. Our phones are so powerful, the iPhone 12 and the new Samsung phones. I can't even be in the vehicle with them if somebody's talking on an iPhone 12 and it's on speakerphone. I lose consciousness. I can hear what's going on, but I can't wake up. My brain goes into shock and it goes into survival mode. So let's go back to the kids formula. This kids formula is a gummy and it's sweetened with cane sugar. They take 2 in the morning, 2 at night. And the reason it took so long to put this formula out was because Dr. Prasad had to find a company that was small enough that would make it without heating the gummy. And so these gummies have been made at less than 200 degrees heat. And he has proven that there is no denaturing of the nutritional value of the gummy. Hasn't been done before. What we're finding in the gummy world is that a lot of gummies out there are just gummies and there's no nutritive value in it. And we're also bringing a very specific fish oil to the market. We're in the negotiation phases of it right now, and it's going to be for physicians only.
Mm-hmm.
And this fish oil comes out of northern Chile, and it's made from anchovies, and it's so pure. But what we found in our research in fish oil is that I'd say probably 97, 98% of the fish oil is actually cut with hexane isopropanol. It's a solvent. And we know this because it dissolves styrofoam cups.
I got another question for you. It's from Janet. She wants to know, would you expound on the concussive symptoms?
Oh, yes, Janet, I love talking about concussion and concussion-like symptoms. So, you know, they start, these symptoms, they go back to the cowboy days, and I grew up in Colorado, so I love the Cowboys. But it starts with insomnia, sleeplessness, irritability, brain fog, ringing in the ears, metallic taste in the mouth. But the irritability is the big one that we see. People can go when they're exposed to too much non-ionizing radiation, like Wi-Fi and routers and cell phones and computers and all those things. They can go from zero to jerk in a blink of an eye. And we're trying to figure out, you know, what are the metals, what's going on in the body that creates that just sudden violent change. And it's a snap, and people make a lot of decisions just on a snap. And 2 years ago, I really put the throttle down in our research and devoted, you know, 100% of our time to it, because I had 12 friends take their lives, and in 1 year. And that was just 2 years ago, before COVID. And one of them was a kid that was just not far from my house, and he broke up with his girlfriend broke up with him, and he said, you know, maybe I should kill myself, and she said, maybe you should, and he jumped in front of the truck. And you know, now with what we've had with these lockdowns, the numbers aren't even out. I don't even have any accuracy on the numbers. Pre-COVID, the number was 125 children completed suicide a day. And now they're saying, man, that number is way, way past that. So when we know, we have to do something about it. And so we can see these symptoms in our children. We can see brain fog in our children. We can see agitation in our children. We can see headaches in our children, ringing in the ears. They'll tell us their ears are ringing. They can't sleep. And those are some of these concussion-like symptoms. We see blurry vision, trouble with vision, itchy, scratchy eyes, dry mouth, those kinds of symptoms. I hope that was helpful, Janet.
Any more questions? So, Russ, to take away from this, you're advocating that healthcare providers give the patient some of this EMF formula before any radiological procedure, turn off their cell phones in the operatories, and remove their routers away from the front desk where their employees are sitting, as far away from people as possible, the routers. Anything else you'd like the offices to do that would mitigate this?
That's a whole nother conversation, Dr. Downs. But what we do, I'm just going to give you the you know, our first three keys. The first key is to reboot the brain. And we have to reboot the brain. The best way that we've found to reboot the brain is with optimum micronutrient formula.
Okay.
And this is a really simple thing to get to be able to provide to your patients. It's not a network marketing company. It's a direct sale company.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you can sell this directly to your patient, and it gets shipped directly to them. And the doctor gets paid 100% of that first order on Thursday. And then they get a percentage of their reorder every month after that. So it's unlocking, we have to unlock the healing cycle first. And that's what we did with the lady that we showed in the slides. There's another product that we use to unlock the healing cycle, and that's called Brain Tap. And we can talk about that at another time.
All right.
The second is to reduce your exposure. And that's an entire topic on its own, Dr. Downs, because there are so many things in our home that we don't realize are creating an electric field. Like, for instance, where I'm sitting in the crack of the couch. It's incredibly uncomfortable. But right here, there's a light switch, and right there, there's a thermostat. And both of those put out an electric field that we can measure, and I'll show that to you next time. This is the only place that's safe, because there's a lamp over here, and that lamp also puts out an electric field. So we have to make awareness for our patients And part of that is just the awareness for the doctors. But we make awareness for our patients and we help them to reduce their exposure.
So
And then
we reduce
third-
exposure and we mitigate some of the cell damage with the formula.
well, the EMF formula is just, it's imperative. We have to protect people from the inside out. We protect them from the outside in when we x-ray them, but they have no protection from their skin. We have to protect from the inside out.
Sure.
There are some things that we can do with special covers and stuff and special glasses and things like that to help
Mhm.
protect, and we can talk about that. And then the last key to this healing cycle, we actually have 7 keys, but the first 3 are imperative. The last one is restorative sleep.
Yes.
We have to get restorative sleep. If we don't get restorative sleep, we can't reboot our brain.
Well, that's one of the
And-
reasons I got interested in this.
Yeah, and so, that's where the chiropractors and the dentists, this is the most, I believe this is the most important relationship in medicine,
I do.
because we're not going to see this with the medical doctors.
Mm-mm.
And so, as if your head's not on straight, you can't breathe right. So you need to have a chiropractor take care of the head and put the head on straight. And then we have to look at the exposome, what has happened to us during the course of our life. So if you've had braces, the hard palate could be restricted and affecting the ability of the tongue to get up into the roof of the mouth. It certainly affects the respiratory mechanism of the skull when we do cranial work. It creates many, many headaches. It creates lots of problems with cerebral spinal fluid flow because this suture in the top of the mouth has been fused. And there are ways to loosen it up, but it's a major, major problem. In addition to that, if they've had braces, that actually pushes the jaw back. And I do this with clients, with patients all the time. You can just breathe, and so if you got these kids that have the sunken jaw, we know that they're snorers. We know that they're suffocating at night.
Right.
And let's take this back to the beginning of the slide. The first slide showed shock. And so if you're suffocating all night long, when you wake up in the morning, your brain and the mitochondria are going, dang, man, I'm so glad I made it through that night. Whew, that was terrible.
They're in sympathetic mode all night long when they're suffocating.
Well, they're in cell danger response all night long. They are in panic survival mode all night long, but then they don't get out of it during the day.
Right.
And then their brain takes a dump during the day and they've just got a delta brain pattern.
Yeah.
And so this restorative sleep aspect is so critical. And then we take it a step further, Dr. Downs, and we actually measure the bedroom. And so we measure the bedroom for EMF, we measure the bedroom for electric fields, we mitigate the bedroom for electric fields. And if somebody wants to take that another step further, we actually have on our website, which I'll give our website to people, we have on our website a switch that can be mounted into your circuit breaker. And with a simple fob, like on your car keys, we can shut off 100% of the electricity in the bedrooms. And when you do that, combined with a mouth guard, we can then create restorative sleep in a sleep sanctuary environment, and people can start to heal their brains.
Yeah. Okay. This is great, Doctor. I'm looking forward to our next broadcast when we get together again, and I want to just thank you for that.
People the opportunity to get on our website.
Yeah.
So I'm just we've got a few people on here. It's dremf.com. That's DOCTOREMF.com.
Right.
And it's a new website. We're still adding lots of content to it, but we have our relationship with EMF Safe Sleep. We are members with them. We have our relationship with Defender Shield, and we have links to all those things. And we also have some links to our labs, our proprietary labs that we're putting out. And we have the BVK kit, the body voltage kit, that people can order for a significant savings when they order it online.
Okay.
So it's normally 185, and I think you can get it off our website at 150. So
Thank you, Dr. Court. Well,
I
it's been
appreciate
great.
it.
Huh?
I hope this was helpful.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
thank
Learned a lot.
everyone for being on it.
Thank you so much. Good night.